My girlfriend was making out with her first love at our college reunion, but I didn't cause a scene. Instead, I handed them the deed to a multi-million-dollar estate right then and there. Everyone in the room thought I'd lost my mind, but I knew the truth. That house was nothing more than a one-way ticket to hell. 3 years ago, I bought a luxury condo overlooking the water in Miami for Olivia and put the entire thing in her name. Now, 3 years later, she was throwing herself into the arms of a trust fund brat named Connor Montgomery in front of all our old friends. It was a pathetic display of betrayal that should have broken me. While the crowd mocked me, I just stood there and clapped with perfect grace before signing the transfer papers. I told them that since they were clearly rekindling their old flame, the penthouse would be my gift for their new life together. I smiled as I watched their eyes light up with greed. Connor thought he had hit the jackpot by stealing my girl and a massive piece of real estate at the same time. He had no clue about the hidden nominee agreement or the $1.6 million in high-interest debt attached to that property. A financial trap was about to snap shut on his neck. The party was at its peak when I started leading the applause under the neon lights of the private lounge. My girlfriend, Olivia, was locked in a deep kiss with her ex while our former classmates cheered like animals. The scene was meant to humiliate me, but I didn't flinch. A sudden silence washed over the room as everyone turned to look at me. They were all holding their breath, waiting for me to explode or crumble so they could have their laugh. I decided to give them a performance they would never forget. I slowly raised my hands and began to clap with a wide smile on my face. I called out that the performance was brilliant, letting my voice echo through the sudden quiet of the room. The shock on their faces was absolutely priceless. I announced that, as a parting gift, I was transferring the title of the waterfront condo I bought for her last year. I looked Connor straight in the eye and told him it was all his now. I congratulated them on their reunion and told them they were truly made for each other. Olivia and her ex looked like they had seen a ghost, their expressions shifting between confusion and sheer disbelief. Connor was still clutching his glass of expensive whiskey, his eyes clouded with that same arrogant look he always had. He looked like a predator who thought he had just walked away with the kill of a lifetime. He kept his arm wrapped tight around Olivia's waist as if marking his territory. Back at the University of Florida, he was the guy everyone wanted to be, the wealthy trust fund kid and student body president. He was also Olivia's first love, a title she never let me live down during our 3 years together. Then there was me, Lucas Vance, the guy who spent his college years grinding away in a library or working 3 jobs just to cover rent. To this crowd of elitist snobs, I was nothing but a lucky nobody. They thought I was still that same desperate kid they could push around. Brittany, who had always been Connor's biggest cheerleader, told me not to be so uptight while she smirked at me. She insisted they were just having fun and that I should be a good sport about the whole thing. The others joined in, acting like a public betrayal was just some harmless party game. They kept saying that Olivia and Connor were always the power couple, so a little kiss shouldn't matter among old friends. I stayed completely silent and kept my eyes fixed on Olivia. I wanted to see if there was even a shred of guilt left in her soul. Her face was bright red, and she couldn't even bring herself to look me in the eye. She didn't make any effort to pull away from Connor, and her entire posture showed she had already moved on. It was clear she had checked out of our relationship long before this party started. I felt something inside me finally snap in that moment. Olivia and I had built a life together over the last 3 years. I had given her everything I had, thinking she was the one I would grow old with. I had managed to pull myself up from nothing to find real success in a city as ruthless as Miami. It wasn't easy to get a foothold in that town, but I did it all for her. I worked myself to the bone to provide a lifestyle she didn't even have to work for. Every time she wanted a designer purse, I put in extra hours for a month just to see her smile. When she mentioned she wanted a real home, I emptied my bank account and took out loans from every contact I had to afford a bayfront condo. I did whatever it took to make her dreams a reality. I was so blinded by love that I put only her name on the property deed. I truly believed that my level of devotion would be met with loyalty. I was even planning the proposal, thinking we were just steps away from the altar. It turned out that I was the only one invested in our future. The very second Connor Montgomery stepped back into the picture, my years of hard work turned into the joke of the night. She threw it all away without a second thought. Olivia gave a pathetic little shrug of resistance as Connor leaned in for another kiss. She eventually just closed her eyes and waited for him to take what he wanted. The entire room went quiet, waiting for the explosion they thought was coming. I stood up right before their lips met, drawing every eye in the room toward me. I could feel the anticipation in the air because they were all expecting me to lose it. They wanted the drama of a jealous boyfriend throwing a fit. They wanted to see me flip tables and scream like a heartbroken loser. Even Connor stopped for a moment, wearing a smug grin that told me he thought he had already won. He was waiting for me to make a fool of myself. I just adjusted my blazer and gave them a calm smile before I started clapping again. The sound was sharp and intentional, cutting through the low hum of the party. I didn't look like a man who had lost anything at all. I shouted out a sarcastic bravo with a smile that was as cold as ice. I told them that it was a hell of a performance and that I was genuinely impressed. My tone was light, but my eyes were fixed on the two of them. I mocked them by saying it was a real tear-jerker to see old flames rekindling like that. Olivia turned pale as a sheet while Connor just stared at me in total confusion. They didn't know how to handle someone who wasn't playing their game. I told the crowd that I didn't want to be a buzzkill since everyone was having such a great time. I announced that I wanted to celebrate the two lovebirds finally finding their happy ending. I told them I had a special surprise to mark the occasion. I took a long pause and watched as everyone in the room leaned in with curiosity. I mentioned that I had bought Olivia a penthouse at the Waterfront Reserve last year and that her name was the only one on the deed. A few people gasped as they realized the value of that property. I saw several people in the crowd turn green with envy because that building is the most expensive real estate in Miami. Olivia actually looked a little softer for a second, probably assuming I was about to beg for her to come back. She clearly underestimated my resolve. I made sure every word I said was crystal clear so there was no misunderstanding. I told the room that I was starting the paperwork immediately to transfer the entire property to Connor Montgomery for free. I watched the greed instantly take over his face. I told Connor that he didn't just win the girl back, but he also scored a multi-million-dollar home to go with her. I urged the entire room to give the happy couple another round of applause. I clapped as loud as I could while they stood there in shock. Olivia was the first to break the silence, her voice sounding high and shaky as she asked if I had lost my mind. She finally shoved Connor away and started stumbling toward me. She looked absolutely terrified of what I was doing. She accused me of being drunk and told me to stop making such a scene in front of everyone. She tried to grab my arm with a look of pure panic in her eyes. I could see the gears turning in her head as she realized she was losing control. I kept smiling as I firmly brushed her hand off my arm. I told her that I was perfectly sober and that I had never been more serious in my life. I wanted her to know that there was no turning back from this. I looked at Connor with a wide grin and told him the penthouse was ready for him to move in tomorrow. I challenged him, asking if he was actually man enough to accept such a massive gift. I knew his ego wouldn't let him say no to that kind of money. Connor tried to act cool as he cleared his throat and straightened his posture. However, he couldn't hide the look of pure, unadulterated greed that was practically glowing in his eyes. The thought of getting that much property for free was too much for him to resist. He said that if I was going to be that generous, it would be rude of him to turn me down. He walked right back to Olivia and pulled her close to him as if he were claiming a trophy. He thought he was showing me who the real alpha was. I suggested that we put the whole thing in writing right then so they wouldn't have to worry about me changing my mind. I reached into my bag and pulled out a notepad and a pen. I was going to make sure this trap was legally binding before the night was over. I wrote out a formal statement saying that I, Lucas Vance, was voluntarily gifting the penthouse at the Waterfront Reserve to Connor Montgomery. I made sure to mention that Olivia was currently holding it as a nominee. I signed it with a flourish and handed it over. I could hear Connor breathing heavily as he stared at the paper in disbelief. He grabbed it from me like he thought I might take it back and scribbled his name at the bottom. He looked like he had just won the lottery. He held the paper up for everyone to see and warned me not to be a sore loser or try to back out of the deal. I just gave him a thin, cold smile and told him not to worry. I promised him that I was more of a man than he would ever be. Olivia screamed my name and asked where I was going as I turned toward the door. I didn't even bother looking back at her while I gave a dismissive wave of my hand. She was officially out of my life, and she didn't even know what was coming next. I stopped at the door for one last moment and turned back to address the entire room. I told everyone that the tap of the night was on me and they should all enjoy themselves. I wanted them to remember my generosity before the reality of the situation set in. I took out my phone and ignored the endless stream of iMessages and missed calls from Olivia. I dialed a different number as I walked toward my car. This was the start of the real plan. I greeted my lawyer, Ms. Thompson, while watching the traffic flow through the Miami streets. I told her that it was time to move forward with everything we had prepared. There was no going back now. I stared at the luxury tower across the bay and felt a cold smile spread across my face. I confirmed that I was absolutely certain about my decision. I told her to notify the other parties and set up the meeting for 10 the next morning. I wondered if Olivia and Connor really thought I reached this level of success by being impulsive. They must have thought I was just some heartbroken idiot acting out of spite. They had no idea that they were walking right into a gilded cage I built specifically for them. My battery was almost empty because Olivia wouldn't stop blowing up my phone. I finally checked her messages and found exactly what I expected, a mess of angry demands and fake apologies. She was trying every trick in the book to keep her grip on the property. She was demanding that I come back and stop embarrassing her in front of her friends. She kept insisting the condo belonged to her and that I had no right to give it away. Her true colors were finally showing, and they were uglier than I imagined. I couldn't help but laugh as I read through her desperate texts. All the fake apologies were just a distraction for what she really cared about, the money. 3 years of our life together didn't mean a thing compared to a piece of real estate. I took a photo of the agreement Connor signed and posted it to our alumni group on Facebook. The group had been dead for months, but it exploded the second that picture went up. Everyone was talking about the insane gift I had just handed over. Connor actually had the nerve to post a smug emoji with a caption about how easy it was to win. Olivia, on the other hand, completely lost it and started sending long, screaming voice notes. She threatened to sue me and called me every name in the book. Ms. Thompson called me the next morning to confirm that the legal notices had been delivered. She told me that Olivia had been calling her office nonstop since the sun came up. Apparently, she was becoming extremely agitated. My lawyer told me that Olivia was claiming the apartment was a personal gift and belonged only to her. I just said that was excellent while I got ready for the day. I was actually happy she was putting up a fight because it made the trap even more effective. I arrived at the building just as Olivia and Connor were stepping out of the lobby. Olivia looked like a wreck with swollen, red eyes from crying all night. Connor still had that arrogant look on his face, acting like he owned the entire street. Connor saw me and immediately tried to play the tough guy, telling me I wasn't welcome on the property. He claimed the place belonged to Olivia and would be his in no time. He told me to save myself the embarrassment and get lost. Olivia glared at me and accused me of trying to blackmail her with this public stunt. She screamed that the condo was hers and that no one was ever going to take it away. She was standing there with Connor like they were a united front against me. I leaned against my car and asked who said anything about taking the place back. I told them I was actually there to help them move out of my old life. I pointed toward the massive moving truck that was pulling up to the curb right on schedule. I told Connor that a high-class guy like him shouldn't have to live with my old furniture. I explained that I hired a crew to clear everything out so they could start fresh with their own things. The look of confusion on their faces was priceless. Olivia started screaming that every single item inside that penthouse belonged to her. I just raised an eyebrow and asked if she was really claiming she bought the custom furniture and the high-end appliances herself. I reminded her that she hadn't earned a single cent in the last 3 years. I reminded her that I paid for every single thing in that apartment, from the designer kitchen gadgets to the smallest bathroom accessories. She tried to argue that they were all gifts, but her voice was weak and trembling. She knew she didn't have a leg to stand on legally. Ms. Thompson stepped forward right on cue and handed a thick stack of papers to Olivia. She informed her that the document was a full inventory of everything I had purchased for the residence. Every item was backed up by receipts and bank statements. My lawyer explained that the law allowed me to revoke gifts before any formal transfer was finalized. She stated that I was officially taking back every piece of personal property inside that building. We had the legal right to strip the place bare. Ms. Thompson then turned her attention to Connor and handed him his own set of legal documents. She explained that while Olivia's name was on the title, I was the one who actually paid for the property. She made it clear that I was the true owner of the equity. She revealed that we had a notarized nominee agreement signed by Olivia that proved she was just holding the title for me. The document stated clearly that I was the sole beneficial owner of the penthouse. Olivia's face went completely white as she realized I had planned for this years ago. Both of them shouted in shock when they heard about the nominee agreement. Olivia looked at me with pure horror in her eyes, unable to believe I had protected myself so thoroughly. She was finally realizing that her dream of a free fortune was disappearing. I reminded her that she was too busy drinking champagne to actually read the paperwork on the day we closed. I told her the agreement was signed in triplicate and was perfectly legal. I never go into any business deal without a safety net, and my relationship was no exception. I've always believed that business is a form of war, and I never enter a fight without being ready. It turns out that philosophy works just as well for romance. I honestly hoped I would never have to use that document, but I was glad I had it. My lawyer pointed out the most important part of the agreement Connor signed the previous night. It stated that I was gifting him the property that Olivia was holding as my nominee. This meant the gift was entirely dependent on the property being returned to me first. Since Olivia was now claiming the property was hers, she was refusing to honor the nominee agreement. Ms. Thompson informed Connor that because of this dispute, I couldn't actually give him the condo yet. I had effectively pitted the two of them against each other for the ultimate prize. I never had a single intention of actually handing that penthouse over to him. I just dug a massive hole and watched the two of them jump right into it. I wanted to see how long their true love would last when there was a multi-million-dollar property on the line. I told Connor that if he wanted the place, he just had to convince Olivia to admit she wasn't the real owner. Then I asked Olivia if she was really willing to lose her luxury lifestyle just to make her old boyfriend happy. I could see the suspicion starting to grow between them instantly. Connor turned on Olivia with a look of pure rage and asked if the nominee agreement was actually real. Olivia was shaking so hard she could barely speak, stammering that she didn't know what was happening. I could see that the foundation of their relationship was already crumbling. I knew she was full of it because I specifically explained the document to her the day we signed it. She was just so obsessed with the status of owning a penthouse that she didn't listen to a word I said. Now, her greed was finally catching up to her. Connor yelled that we were both just teaming up to make him look like an idiot. Olivia tried to grab his arm and beg him to believe her, but he just shoved her away in disgust. He was already starting to look at her like she was the enemy. Connor demanded that she prove her loyalty by signing the place over to him immediately. Olivia screamed back that it was impossible because her name was the only one on the official deed. They were trapped in a loop of greed and blame that I was happy to watch. I gave a signal to the moving crew and told them to start clearing the place out. I instructed them to take every single item that I had paid for, leaving nothing behind. The workers rushed into the lobby while Olivia tried and failed to stop them. It didn't take long before all the high-end art and custom furniture I picked out were being hauled out to the truck. Olivia watched in tears as her collection of designer bags and expensive shoes were thrown into boxes. The luxury life she loved so much was being piled up on the sidewalk like a heap of garbage. Olivia finally broke down and collapsed onto the pavement as she watched her world fall apart. She let out a scream of pure desperation that sounded more like a wounded animal than a human. It was the sound of a woman who had finally realized she lost everything. Connor just stood there and watched her cry without even trying to comfort her. All the affection he had shown at the party was gone, replaced by a look of cold calculation. He was already figuring out how to break her so he could get the apartment for himself. My friend Leo called to tell me that my move was absolutely legendary. He said Connor and Olivia were fighting constantly inside that empty, echoing penthouse. Connor was apparently bullying her into signing the property back over to me just so he could claim his half. Olivia was standing her ground, claiming the place was hers and shouting that Connor only wanted her for the money. Leo mentioned that things had gotten so bad they actually had a physical fight a couple of nights ago. The neighbors even ended up calling the cops on them. I wasn't looking for a sorry or any kind of remorse from them. I wanted their own greed and paranoia to eat them alive until there was nothing left. I wanted to see them tear each other to pieces over a prize that didn't even exist. Connor was all over the alumni Facebook group, trying to act like the victim in all of this. He told everyone I was a snake and warned them to watch who they trusted. Olivia had gone completely silent on social media, likely because she couldn't face the humiliation. Ms. Thompson reached out to me with a new update about the case. It seemed Connor had contacted her behind Olivia's back to cut a deal. He offered to help us force Olivia into honoring the nominee agreement in exchange for a piece of the action. His condition was that once I got the title back, I had to sign over 50% of the property to him. I couldn't believe how shameless he was being after everything that happened. He was literally trying to team up with me to screw over the woman he claimed to love. My lawyer reminded me that while contracts are fixed, people are always changing. She suggested we draft a new agreement with some very specific legal clauses hidden in the fine print. I told her to go ahead and make it ironclad. I met Connor at the law firm a few days later, and he looked like he hadn't slept in a week. Despite his exhausted appearance, his eyes were glowing with a desperate kind of greed. He didn't even acknowledge me and went straight for the paperwork. The deal was simple. If Connor could get Olivia to sign the property back to me within 30 days, I would give him half of the title. The contract looked perfect on the surface, exactly what a greedy man like him wanted to see. He signed it without hesitating for even a second. I asked Connor if he could really betray Olivia after everything they had shared. He stopped writing for a moment and just gave me a cold, arrogant smirk. He told me that she would do the exact same thing to him if she had the chance. He argued that she had played him for a fool by not mentioning the nominee agreement from the start. He claimed that a woman who only cares about money doesn't deserve any kind of loyalty. It was the most hypocritical thing I had ever heard in my life. I couldn't shake the feeling that Connor's hatred toward me wasn't just about Olivia. I saw something much deeper in his eyes, a kind of personal resentment that went beyond our history with the same girl. I asked Leo to dig into what Connor had been doing since we graduated. It turned out that greed was a powerful motivator because Connor got the job done in record time. My lawyer called me just 3 days later to say that Olivia had finally agreed to the transfer. I met them both at the title company to finalize everything. Olivia looked like a shadow of her former self when I saw her at the office. She was pale and thin, and all the life seemed to have drained from her eyes. She looked completely broken, like she had been through a war and lost. Connor stood over her like a prison guard, making sure she signed every single page of the documents. He looked at me with a look of pure victory, truly believing he had outplayed me. He thought he was walking away with half a penthouse and no more Olivia to deal with. Connor came up to me after the signing, acting like we were the best of friends again. I told him my lawyer would be in touch within 3 days to add his name to the property title. He was ecstatic, believing he was finally about to become a millionaire. Olivia walked out of the office looking like a total ghost, but Connor didn't even bother to look her way. He just hopped into his car and started humming a song as he pulled out of the parking lot. He had already discarded her like a used tool. I didn't feel a shred of sympathy as I watched her walk away alone. You reap exactly what you sow in this life, and she was finally facing the consequences of her choices. She had nobody to blame for this nightmare except herself. Connor showed up at the law firm exactly when he was supposed to, looking like he was about to be crowned king. He announced that today was the first day of his new, wealthy life. He was wearing his most expensive suit for the occasion. My lawyer stopped him before he could sign and said she needed to go over the debt schedule for the property. Connor froze in his seat and asked what the hell she was talking about. He thought the apartment was completely paid for in cash. Ms. Thompson explained that since he was becoming a 50% owner, he was also responsible for 50% of the debts. It was a standard legal requirement that he hadn't bothered to check. The smile on his face vanished in an instant. She informed him that there was $1.6 million in outstanding debt attached to the penthouse. Since he owned half, he was now personally liable for $800,000 of it. He looked like he was about to have a heart attack right there in the office. He needed to find $800,000 in cash just to settle his share of the liability. I knew for a fact that he didn't even have a fraction of that kind of money. His entire life was a front, and I had just exposed the truth. Connor jumped up and started screaming that the whole thing was impossible. He snarled that I'd set a trap for him, and he was absolutely right. He was starting to realize that the prize he fought so hard for was actually a financial death sentence. My lawyer called me to say that the fish had taken the bait, but then snapped the line and ran. Apparently, Connor had a total meltdown and ripped the contract to shreds before storming out. I just told her to save the pieces as evidence that he had forfeited his claim. Leo found out that Connor's dad had completely cut him off after he lost the family's money on bad investments. The guy who showed up to the reunion acting like a billionaire was actually completely broke. His entire reputation was built on a pile of lies that were about to come crashing down. Connor started a massive smear campaign against me on Twitter and Facebook, calling me a fraud and a backstabber. He told everyone that I had tricked him with a fake contract to steal his property. He was desperately trying to destroy my reputation before I could expose him. Leo was actually worried and told me that the rumors were starting to hurt my image. I told him to just let it happen and stay calm. I was already preparing a final gift for everyone who was following the drama. We all gathered for Professor Harrison's 70th birthday party a couple of days later. It was a huge event filled with the most influential people in Miami's tech and business scenes. I knew Connor would be there, trying to secure a government grant he desperately needed. Connor walked right up to me and started shouting so the surrounding guests could hear. He accused me of stealing a condo from my ex and asked how I could even show my face at such a prestigious event. He was trying to humiliate me in front of the one person I respected most. Professor Harrison came over to see what all the noise was about, looking very concerned. He looked at me and asked if there was any truth to the things Connor was shouting. The entire room went silent, waiting for my response. I told the crowd that the truth isn't about who shouts the loudest. I turned to Connor and calmly asked him to show everyone the proof that I had faked any of the debts. He stammered, realizing he had already destroyed the only evidence he had. I reminded him that he had specifically called the $200,000 loan from Professor Harrison a fabrication. I turned to the professor and gave him a respectful bow, apologizing that his name had been dragged into this mess. Connor looked like he was starting to realize he had made a fatal mistake. I told Connor that he had no idea what that money actually represented. It wasn't just a loan, it was my inheritance from my late father, Mark Mancino. I explained that it was a share of the profits from the Helios chip project they had developed together. I made it clear to everyone in the room that my success was built on hard work and late nights, not schemes. I had spent years making Helios chip a reality to honor what my father started. My career was built on integrity, something Connor wouldn't know anything about. I explained that I used my first major payout from the project to buy that penthouse as a gift. Every single dollar I spent was earned through honest work and high-level engineering. Connor's face turned ashen as the room began to murmur with respect for my father's name. Professor Harrison was fuming as he looked at Connor, asking how he could have ever taught someone so devoid of honor. He called for security and ordered them to drag Connor out of the party immediately. He told the guards he never wanted to see Connor's face again. Leo told me that Connor was now considered social poison and that everyone had blocked him. He also mentioned that Olivia had posted a massive apology on Facebook, claiming she was manipulated by Connor the whole time. She was begging for a chance to talk to him and ask for forgiveness. I told Leo that while some mistakes can be forgiven, betrayal is never one. I instructed him to just ignore her because she no longer existed as far as I was concerned. I was finally finished with that part of my life. Ms. Thompson confirmed that we had filed a major defamation lawsuit. She said the evidence was so overwhelming that the case was completely airtight. He was looking at massive financial damages and a total loss in his professional career. My business partner called to tell me that the Helios chip had just been picked up by a global consortium. I looked at a photo of my father on the counter and whispered to him that we finally made it. I felt a profound sense of peace as I looked out over the Miami skyline. That chapter of my life was officially closed and the death was paid in full. I walked toward the window, feeling lighter than I had before. My real life was only just beginning. True power is never found in the loudness of a reaction, but in the quiet sovereignty of your own character. This story reminds us that when the world attempts to humiliate you, your composure isn't a sign of weakness. It is your ultimate defense. It teaches us that while love should be deep, wisdom must be sharp. Setting boundaries and protecting your hard work isn't an act of cynicism, but a profound commitment to your own future. Ultimately, those who chase shortcuts fueled by greed will always stumble in the traps of their own making, while the success you build through integrity remains a fortress that no betrayal can touch. If you are currently in your own grind, hold your head high. The peace of knowing you've earned your place is a wealth that can never be stolen, and the most powerful chapter of your life begins the moment you stop seeking validation from those who never deserved your heart.